In this video, I will go through the attachments feature. Now, in order to do that, I will go back to the blend sampling sample and have a look at the Maria prefab that is used in that sample. As you can see in this model, she actually has a sword here that is a separate object. Now it still works because the object is also rigged together with the character, and even though it's a separate object, it's both being used in the same way. So there's two skin mesh renderers here, and the sword is just part of the animation. Now this is perfect for this situation, but sometimes you want to be able to use other objects and that are not necessarily rigged to be with this character, and you want to dynamically swap them out. So how would we do that? Now let's add here let's for example imagine that we want to put something else in her left hand. Now I have this bat model here. If I drag it onto the scene here, onto the prefab, and I'm gonna reset here. I could just drag it onto her left hand and then 0 here, and then I'm gonna try to position it correctly, like this, for example, more or less. That's something like this. So that means that if I look at the animation here, it seems to be like that should work. But if I now try this, so I close my Maria prefab and I regenerate the animator, which is also used here. Of course, nothing shows up. If I run this, there is no bat in her other hand at all. So how do we fix this? So if we go back to the Maria prefab, now instead of putting this bat here, we're actually going to put what we call an anchor, an attachment anchor. So I'm gonna call this one left hand, and I'm gonna give it the coordinates. I'm gonna copy the transform component to this left hand here. Now this also means if I place the bat here that this should zero out, which it does. Now I can actually remove the bat, and I can assign here in the configuration attachment anchors. There's going to be only one. You can have as many as you want, but just to test it out, I'm going to do only one. And I'm going to drag this transform here, and I'm going to call it left hand. And I'm also going to check this checkbox here and call it Maria, because I want to generate the enums file, and also, more importantly in this case, the initializer that will come with that. But we'll talk about that later. So let's save this, go back to the scene here, click on Maria and regenerate now. Now nothing changes here visually, but you will be able to now add this attachment to the actual baked animator. So if I now drag the bat model in here, it doesn't really matter where I put it. I can now say I'm going to, if I look at the baked assets here, this attachment anchors IDs has been generated with this left hand in here based on the fact that I declared one of those anchors, and I also have the initializer, which is the general initializer specified on these anchor IDs of Maria. So what do? I simply drag this on this attachment, and well, if there would be more anchors, there would be more choices here, but here there's only left hand. I save, press play. And you can see here that it's indeed working, and you have actually the entity here. And you can also see very clearly the difference now between the sword and the body, who are basically stationary, but they're just being displaced. Only their vertices are being displaced, which is totally different for the bat, which the shader doesn't do anything, but it's the object itself that's being displaced. And you can see that this all still works if I still use the blend and everything, so the system will take care of that for you. Now you can also do this dynamically. Let's have a look for that at the actual attachments sample scene. So in here you will see, let's give a bit more space here, you will see that when I press play, that there is a bat here in her hand as initial object, but I can swap it out with a sword, back to a bat, back to a sword, and I can also put something on her head here, like a square, like a round cylinder kind of thing, or a sphere. And these are all dynamic objects that will appear. You can actually see that here in the entities that are underneath here, that they are being swapped out. So how does all of this work? Well, you have this. For this sample, I've actually created a new Maria prefab called Maria Attachments. And if you look at her, you'll see that there is two anchors defined on top of her head and on her right hand. And these are just transforms that I give a specific name. The name doesn't even matter. The only thing that matters is the fact that you name them here and then put a reference to them. So here you have those two anchors. And then you can bake. You can also bake without the enums, in which case you don't have access to the initializer, and you can only refer to these anchors by its index. So we can actually Maria attachment. This has already been done, but we can click on it again, and if we look, we indeed have these anchor IDs, which has the right hand and the head as two enumeration identifiers for those two IDs. Now you'll see that the bat is there, and the bat has the initializer on the right hand, so that's why we start the scene. She already has the bat in her right hand, but there are 5 other objects there, and we can see that in the attachments folder here. We have the bat, the sword, and then those 3 head objects. And all of these objects have one thing in common: they all have the GPU ECS attachment behavior attached to it without any problems, just needs to be attached to it. Now once you have those prefabs here, you can in the scene we have created a attachment manager in which those 5 prefabs are being declared. So the first 2 is the bat and the sword. They're attached to the right hand anchor, and the other to the head anchor. And then the other thing to note in this scene is that you have these buttons here. So let's have a look at those buttons. The bat button until the sphere button, they all have this attachment script attached to it. And if you click on them, They all call the attach function of the attachment script, and each button individually has a different index here that is set on it. So, and this index corresponds with the index within this prefabs list. So you have right, bat, sword, square, round, and sphere, and bat, sword, square, round, and sphere. You can see that the index here corresponds with that. So how does it work behind the scenes? Well, we have the manager here, the attachment manager, which has the declaration here, these attachment prefabs. That's this thing with the structure here defined. Here, that's this structure here. And all it does is to bake this during the baking of the GPU ECS animator into an entity, it will add this buffer, and this buffer is basically a copy of the authoring structure here. Instead of the game object, you have the entity. So then you also have the attachment script. Remember, this was attached to the buttons with a different index for each button. And there is also a system here which has a boolean. So if you click on attach, this boolean is set to true and the index is set. So basically, whenever you press on a button, this will be called. This whole thing will be called with the attachment to set index depending on which button you clicked. So what happens then? It will find the attachment primand buffer element, so the one element, the one entity that has that, which of course is the GPU ECS animator, because that's the one where this behavior has been attached to. And then we can get the prefab based on the index. So we can one of the 5 prefab that were declared on it. So and from that we get the entity and the anchor. Now, because we know the anchor, we can then find through all the entities that are there the one to delete, because we want to replace the attachment that is already there with the same anchor. So in this case, we go through all of them that are already on the screen. So any entity with this GPU ECS attachment component, we check if the anchor IDs are the same and we destroy it. And then we just create a new attachment, make sure it's parented, it's a child of the GPU ECS animator, and we set the GPU ECS attachment component with the 2 right fields here. And when we do that, the whole thing just works. And you can see that very nicely by looking at the entities hierarchy here, how these entities are being replaced. See, now it's the sword. If I click on the bat, the sword is gone, and now it's the bat now. And at the same time, you also have these different hats, which you can also see now here. The hats are actually parented under one object, just because it's using some scaling to get there. So that's it for the attachments feature.